Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm here again with a brand new story. Enjoy the story, and don't forget to share your valuable thoughts in the comments.
What if one of the darkest mysteries in 19th century America was hidden behind the walls of an ordinary village church for nearly a century? What if in the year 1835, deep inside the cold forests of New England, a discovery was made so disturbing that local officials tried to erase every trace of it from history? And what if the people who uncovered it slowly began disappearing one by one? This is not a legend invented for entertainment. It is based on one of the strangest unsolved historical incidents connected to early American settlements, missing records, hidden burial chambers, and a case that was never fully explained. This is the forgotten mystery of the Vermont Hollow Church discovery. In the early 1800s, the northeastern region of the United States was still covered by vast forests, scattered settlements, and isolated farming communities. Travel was slow, communication was unreliable, and entire villages could exist for decades with little contact from the outside world. In southern Vermont, near the edge of dense woodland, stood a small settlement locally known as Hollow Creek. It was not an official town on most maps, but rather a loose farming community made up of fewer than 200 people. The residents were mostly descendants of English settlers, deeply religious and suspicious of outsiders. At the center of the community stood a modest wooden church built around 1798. The church was simple: white exterior paint, narrow windows, steep roof, and a bell tower visible above the tree line. To outsiders, it looked completely ordinary. But according to surviving local journals, something about the church made residents uncomfortable. Travelers passing through reportedly refused to stay near it after dark. Children were warned never to enter its cellar, and older residents were known to become visibly nervous whenever anyone asked questions about the building's original construction. For years, no one publicly explained why. That changed in autumn of 1835. In October, after weeks of unusually heavy rainfall, part of the church foundation collapsed. The collapse damaged the eastern wall and exposed part of the underground cellar. At first, villagers believed the damage was minor, but when workers entered the exposed section to inspect the foundation, they discovered something no one expected. Behind the stone support wall was a hidden chamber. The chamber had not appeared on any church construction plans. In fact, according to official records, no underground room should have existed there at all. Witness accounts describe the chamber as narrow, cold, and unnaturally dry despite recent flooding. Its walls were made from rough-cut stone, much older than the church itself. This immediately raised questions. How could a chamber older than the building itself exist directly beneath it? Workers entered carrying lanterns. Inside, they found a wooden ladder descending deeper underground. At the bottom was a second chamber. This room was larger, much larger. And what they discovered there would become the source of decades of rumors, disappearances, and fear. The floor was covered in old wooden boxes. Some had rotted open. Inside were human bones. Not one or two, dozens, possibly more. Many appeared to belong to children. Others were adult remains. No proper burial arrangement was observed. The bones had been stacked, separated, and in some cases tied together using cloth strips long since decayed. Workers reportedly fled the chamber in panic. Local authorities were contacted. A magistrate from a nearby district arrived 2 days later. His name appears in fragmented records as Elias Morton. Morton ordered the church sealed temporarily while an investigation was conducted. Only a handful of notes survive from his visit. In one surviving document, Morton wrote, "The chamber is inconsistent with all known records. The arrangement of remains is deliberate and deeply troubling." He also noted symbols carved on the inner stone walls. These markings did not resemble standard Christian iconography. Some looked geometric, others resembled circles intersected by vertical lines. One witness described them as calendar-like. Another called them warnings. No agreement was reached. As word spread, fear gripped Hollow Creek. Residents began accusing one another. Some claimed the bones belonged to early settlers killed during harsh winters. Others insisted the chamber predated European settlement entirely. A darker theory soon emerged. According to several accounts, older villagers admitted knowledge of the lower room. Not its contents, only its existence. This revelation caused outrage. Why had they remained silent? Their explanation was disturbing. They claimed the chamber was never to be opened because previous attempts brought disaster. Though difficult to verify, several journal entries from the early 1800s mention unexplained illnesses, livestock deaths, and disappearances shortly after church repairs disturbed the cellar area. Most had been dismissed as coincidence. Now, in light of the discovery, villagers began connecting events. Then things got worse. Within 3 weeks of the chamber's opening, one of the original workers disappeared. His name was Thomas Reed, age 27. He was last seen leaving his home before sunrise. His boots were later found near the church entrance. No body was recovered. A week later, a second laborer vanished, then another. Panic escalated rapidly. Night patrols were organized. Families kept candles burning until dawn. Attendance at church services collapsed. Even the local pastor reportedly refused to sleep inside the rectory.
Magistrate Morton attempted to continue his investigation. He collected several artifacts from the chamber, including cloth fragments, metal clasps, and a journal found inside a sealed wooden box. This journal became perhaps the most mysterious object recovered. Its leather cover was severely damaged. Pages were brittle and incomplete. The handwriting did not match modern English script. Some entries were readable, others were written in symbols or coded shorthand. A translated passage from one surviving copy allegedly reads, "They sealed what should not remain above ground." No context followed. Another page referenced the second burial. No explanation was provided. Before Morton could submit his final report, he too vanished. Historical records show he never returned to his residence. His horse was found wandering near a hollow trail 2 miles north of Hollow Creek. Saddle intact, no rider. At this point, regional authorities became involved. An order was reportedly issued to restrict access to Hollow Creek temporarily. Official explanation: public safety concerns related to unstable foundations and flooding. Unofficially, rumors spread much further. Nearby towns began avoiding Hollow Creek entirely. Trade routes shifted. Merchants refused deliveries. Some families left permanently. Within 5 years, the settlement had largely emptied. By 1842, Hollow Creek was effectively abandoned. But the story did not end there. In 1891, more than 50 years later, a historian researching abandoned New England communities became interested in Hollow Creek. His name was Benjamin Hale. Hale visited the site and documented what remained. By then, the church had partially collapsed. Nature had begun reclaiming the structure. But according to Hale's notes, evidence of the underground chamber remained. He described disturbed stonework, collapsed stairs, and fragments of carved wall markings. Curiously, Hale also claimed that the chamber appeared intentionally damaged, not by time, by force, as though someone had tried to destroy it. Several pages from Hale's field journal are missing. The remaining pages end abruptly after a final entry dated November 14, 1891. It reads, "Found additional recess behind the northern wall. Something was removed." No further explanation exists. Hale never published his findings. He died less than a year later from an illness described only as rapid nervous decline. Skeptics dismiss the Hollow Creek story as exaggerated folklore, and to be fair, parts of the case are difficult to verify completely. Rural record-keeping in early America was inconsistent. Many documents were lost to fire, weather, and poor preservation. Yet enough fragments remain to suggest something very unusual truly occurred. Property records confirm an abandoned church structure once existed near the reported area. Regional letters from the 1830s reference unusual disturbances in a southern Vermont settlement, and archived notes mention an unnamed magistrate investigating human remains beneath a religious building. These details align too closely to ignore. But perhaps the most unsettling fact is what was never explained. Who placed the remains there? Why were children among them? Why was the chamber older than the church itself? And why did multiple generations seem determined to keep it hidden? Some historians believe the site may have originally been built atop an older colonial burial vault or forgotten settlement structure. Others suggest more disturbing possibilities involving secret religious practices or undocumented disease burials. No theory fully explains the symbols, hidden architecture, or missing investigators. Today, the exact location of Hollow Creek remains debated. Some believe the original site was eventually demolished and absorbed into surrounding woodland. Others claim its ruins still exist, hidden somewhere off unmarked trails in Vermont. Local legends continue to warn hikers not to search for abandoned church foundations in remote forest regions, especially after dark. Because, according to one surviving oral account from the late 1800s, the church was never empty, only sealed. And that is what makes this case so unforgettable. Not merely the bones, not the disappearances, not even the vanished records, but the possibility that ordinary people discovered something buried beneath their town, something intentionally hidden for reasons they were never meant to understand. A mystery born in 1835, a church swallowed by forest, and a chamber beneath America that history still refuses to explain.
In the decades after Hollow Creek was abandoned, the mystery should have faded into history, like countless other forgotten American settlements. Instead, it became darker, because although the village disappeared, strange reports connected to the site continued appearing long after its collapse. In 1904, a railway survey team working near southern Vermont documented an unusual incident while mapping undeveloped woodland. Their assignment was routine. The United States was expanding transportation routes, and engineers were constantly evaluating land for potential rail lines. One team of 4 men camped near a wooded ridge not far from where older locals warned them not to stay. According to the surviving field notes of Assistant Surveyor Charles Whitmore, nearby residents strongly advised against setting camp in that section of forest. Their warning was simple: do not remain there after sunset. The surveyors ignored them.
Whitmore later wrote that the locals refused to explain their warning, only repeating that the ground there is wrong. At first, nothing unusual happened. The men set camp, marked tree lines, and prepared instruments. But after midnight, one member of the crew reported hearing church bells. This made no sense. There were no active churches within several miles. The nearest settlement was small and silent. Still, multiple crew members confirmed hearing a faint bell-like sound carried through the trees. Not continuously, only every few minutes, slow, measured, deliberate. Whitmore described it as sounding as though something were calling from beneath heavy earth. The next morning, one worker named Samuel Pierce was missing. His bedroll remained untouched, boots gone, lantern missing. No signs of struggle. Search efforts located tracks leading away from camp toward deeper woodland. Then the tracks stopped. Not faded, stopped, as if the person walking had simply vanished. Whitmore's notes became increasingly unsettled after this event. He wrote that the remaining crew began experiencing sleep disturbances. One man claimed to hear whispering outside his tent. Another insisted he saw candlelight moving between trees, despite no one being present. On the third night, the team abandoned the survey. Their official report blamed weather complications. Unofficially, Whitmore never returned to field surveying again. Years later, his personal diary was donated to a regional archive. One final entry appears shortly after the Vermont incident. It reads, "There is something buried under those woods, and whatever was sealed there was not buried to protect us from it, but to protect it from us." No explanation followed. This would not be the last strange occurrence. In 1927, local teenagers exploring abandoned sites reportedly located what they believed were the remains of an old stone foundation deep in forest overgrowth. Descriptions matched earlier accounts of Hollow Creek Church. One teenager, 17-year-old Robert Klein, later told his family they discovered an opening beneath collapsed debris. He described it as a hole leading into blackness. When asked what they found, he reportedly refused to answer. That same week, Robert became unusually withdrawn. Family members noted severe anxiety, insomnia, and repeated refusal to discuss the trip. He allegedly told his older brother only one sentence: "It wasn't empty." 3 days later, Robert disappeared while walking home from a general store. Search teams found no trace, no witnesses, no body. His case remains unsolved. Because this was a small rural disappearance, national attention never followed. To most of America, Robert Klein was simply another missing teenager from the 1920s. But locally, older residents whispered a familiar explanation: he had gone too close. By the mid-20th century, the Hollow Creek story had become a regional legend. Parents warned children not to wander into certain woods. Hunters avoided particular ridgelines. Campers spoke of unease in areas where no obvious threat existed. Some dismissed these stories as inherited superstition, yet a surprising number of independent accounts described similar details: bell sounds, cold air near buried stone, feelings of being watched, and occasionally geometric symbols carved into isolated rock surfaces.
In 1958, an amateur historian named Daniel Mercer attempted to separate fact from folklore. Unlike earlier investigators, Mercer approached the case academically. He collected newspaper clippings, church records, missing persons reports, and oral histories from elderly Vermont residents. His goal was simple: determine whether Hollow Creek had ever truly existed. Mercer succeeded in finding enough evidence to strongly suggest the settlement was real. Tax references, fragmented census lists, and private land documents all pointed toward a small 19th century farming community, later erased from practical records. But Mercer found something even
unknown stranger. Several early land ownership records connected the Hollow Creek property not to a church organization, but to a private trust established before the church was built. This trust had almost no surviving documentation, no clear founders, no obvious purpose, only one surviving line in an 1801 transfer note. Custodial rights maintained under original condition of lower site. Mercer reportedly became obsessed with this phrase. What was the lower site, and why would a trust specifically preserve rights connected to underground property conditions? Before Mercer could publish his findings, tragedy struck. In February 1960, his house suffered a fire. Most research materials were destroyed. Authorities ruled it accidental, faulty heating equipment. But friends later claimed Mercer had repeatedly expressed paranoia in the weeks beforehand. He allegedly believed someone was watching his work. One colleague recalled Mercer saying, "Every time I get close to understanding what happened there, something interferes." After the fire, Mercer abandoned the project entirely. He never publicly discussed Hollow Creek again. Modern historians remain divided. Some argue the entire narrative grew from overlapping regional myths combined with isolated tragedies. After all, old America was full of disappearances, disease deaths, unmarked graves, and religious anxieties. Not every mystery requires a supernatural explanation. That is true, but Hollow Creek remains unusually resistant to simple explanation. Too many fragments align. Too many names appear across disconnected records. Too many references point to something intentionally hidden beneath that church. And perhaps the most chilling detail came from a rediscovered letter auctioned privately in 1986. The unsigned letter was dated December 1835, just weeks after the original chamber discovery. Its recipient is unknown, its author unknown, but the contents are disturbing. The surviving passage reads, "The first chamber was not the true concern. What lay beyond it was worse. They believed sealing the entrance would be enough, but the disturbance has already begun." Historians still debate the letter's authenticity. If genuine, it suggests something horrifying. The Chamber of Bones may not have been the primary discovery, only the first layer. Something else may have existed deeper underground, something investigators either found or feared enough not to describe. No confirmed excavation of the site has ever been publicly recorded in modern times. Whether due to lost location data, private ownership, or deliberate suppression remains unclear. And that uncertainty is exactly why the Hollow Creek mystery continues haunting researchers, storytellers, and skeptics alike. Because unlike ordinary ghost stories, this case does not rely on a single witness. It spans generations, collapsed architecture, missing investigators, human remains, hidden chambers, vanished settlements, and documents that appear, disappear, and fragment just enough to leave questions unanswered. Was Hollow Creek simply a forgotten burial scandal buried under layers of fear and folklore? Or did a small American community discover something beneath their church so disturbing that abandoning an entire town felt safer than confronting it? No one knows. Perhaps no one ever will. But if one lesson survives from this forgotten 1835 mystery, it is this: history does not erase dangerous truths. It buries them, and sometimes not deeply enough.